So, hello, YouTube. This is Jay from Learn Linux TV, and I am here with Igor Seletskiy. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, thank you. Nice to be
Awesome.
here.
And it's great to have you. And my understanding is that you are CEO and founder of CloudLinux, correct?
Yes. So I founded the company about 11 years ago with the idea that web hosting industry uh, needs their own Linux distribution. Um, it had to be based on Red Hat, CentOS, because all the tools in the industry were using Red Hat and CentOS, and people wouldn't switch. Yet I couldn't use just Red Hat because it had to be my own kernel. There were some features that weren't in Red Hat 5. It was 10 years ago, Red Hat 6, Project Lenix. So we needed to modify the kernel. We needed to modify Apache. We needed to modify MySQL. So what we did, we took a fork. We made a fork of Red Hat and modified packages, added our own stuff, and started to sell it. And we've been doing it for 10 years quite successfully.
And you sound very modest. I just created a fork of Red Hat. That's a massive undertaking. So that must have been like a very big effort to get something like that off the ground.
We were lucky. So it wasn't me. We had a team. It was very good team, and that's my luck. We had quite a few very good people on the team who knew how to do it before. They did their own distro. So yeah, it was just like that. It took us a few months, and we did it. It was much easier back then, 10 years ago, than it is today. The Red Hat package base was probably 1/20th of what it is today, so much less effort.
And if I'm not mistaken, you have a background in kernel development, correct?
More of a software. I did kernel development back in college days, but not a lot. I'm definitely not a kernel developer. I understand Linux kernel, but no, that's a lot of my team does it, but not me.
Yeah, but it sounds to me like you definitely know your way around a Linux distribution. You have a lot of experience, even though you're modest. I could tell you're passionate. And I'd like to talk a moment about your company, CloudLinux, as well as the various products within that company and how they fit together for your overall mission.
Sure. So we started as a solution for hosting providers. They had a particular problem where one customer on the server could cause issues for all others. So if one website would be slow, it might cause all other websites to be slow. We wanted to solve it. We solved that problem. It gained a lot of traction, or probably most popular distribution among hosting providers. Uh, Tens of millions of websites are hosted on servers running Cloud Linux. It's more than 100,000 servers. So it's been quite successful. But as we're doing it, we came up with a new product, live patching. It was similar to K-Splice, but using different technology. Once again, we were quite successful with that. Um, we started to sell it also only to service providers, but then a lot of enterprises started to come in and ask us for it, and it's the same product. So today, company is very active in enterprise space, and more than half of our sales come from enterprise. Um, and that is true for the for how the company is overall. So we're working with hosting industry and enterprises, but Linux products. We also recently launched extended lifecycle support for CentOS 6. Um, so CentOS 6 just reached the end of life in November. So we have a lot of people who can patch various components. They do patch day to day. Um, so we extended support for patch security bugs for CentOS 6. And we plan to do the same for CentOS 7 and now new distribution because there is not going to be CentOS.
So it sounds to me like you have already solved quite a few problems that enterprises face. And I have personally a background in managed services providers. And the most common complaints I've gotten in my career is, why is my website so slow? And why do we have to reboot this server to update? We can't reboot the server because then our customers can't access it. So already kernel care, with live patching, kernel care plus, you have that as well, which, gives you live patching plus the OpenSSL and glibc, and then your distribution with CloudLinux OS, which is making it even better for the cloud environment and cloud platforms because it runs faster and leaner. Are those safe things to say, my understanding?
I mean, live patching, yes. Cloud Linux, it's very specific. Yes, for hosters, it makes sense. If you, for example, run servers in hospital, no, we don't add values there today.
And I'd like to say personally, using kernel care on the Learn Linux TV servers, my viewers may or may not have noticed, but the servers go down a lot less frequently because when I update things, well, I don't have to reboot. So it's definitely been great. So I want to shift gears to the elephant in the room, which is the news that, was dropped on the Linux community about the new direction with CentOS. And I'd like to get your thoughts on that, if I may.
Well, that was crazy. It was one of those things that you're just waiting to happen. You know it's gonna happen. You just don't know when or how. So back when Red Hat bought CentOS, it was pretty obvious that CentOS will not survive. Um, and it was pretty obvious why Red Hat was doing it. CentOS was more popular than Red Hat. They definitely didn't want that to happen. Um, and for years, I think the policy within Red Hat, or at least that's how it looked from outside, is that let's make it uh, less secure. Let's make sure that patches are released as slow as possible. Let's drain the resources uh, from CentOS until the point that customers will simply be forced to switch to Red Hat. So from that perspective, maybe what they did, which is basically put CentOS out of its misery, is a good thing. They finally killed it. They finally said, okay, if you want to run it in production, you have to migrate. Um, so maybe it's been an honest step on the part of Red Hat. They've been going into this territory, and if you look at the delays between just how long it takes for CentOS to patch things after Red Hat did it, each year it was longer and longer period. So there was clearly an attempt, I don't know if conscious or unconscious, to make CentOS less and less usable for production.
Kind of felt the same way throughout because, with Red Hat buying CentOS and then, of course, IBM buying Red Hat both times, I'm thinking, yeah, CentOS probably is going to go away. But then it didn't for a while. So it still struck me by surprise, even though I predicted this would happen. Enough time has passed where there's no news, there's nothing happening. And then all of a sudden, they dropped it on us and they might have been planning that all along, or it just wanted us to get a little complacent after the buyout, or maybe they did decide, after a while to do that. But I think at the end of the day, it really struck a lot of people by surprise.
Definitely. I mean, we can speculate, but there is few people who know. They will not tell us.
That's the case. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And according to your blog, you guys are planning and are already working on doing something about this.
Yes, so we've been forking Red Hat for the last 10 years. We've forked Red Hat 5, Red Hat 6, Red Hat 7, Red Hat 8. We've been doing it successfully. Our commercial distro uh, is very close. It's like 99% Red Hat. Uh, so we're already doing that. Our plan is to finally give back to the community. And to be honest, for me, it was always the question when and how I can give back to the community. We can do that. We can create a free, no strings attached, no registration necessary, pretty much what CentOS was, distribution, which is fork of Red Hat. And that's what we're planning to do. We're investing into that. We are adding more people so that they would maintain it. And We hope to have something in January of 2021 that people can try, and we hope to get to production state in by the end of Q1 of 2021. And we are very much pushing the time frame because we understand that people are not happy. We understand that people are worried and making plans today what they will do. So we want people to have an option before they switch to Ubuntu.
And I definitely want to underscore the importance of this because as we're talking right now, I'm guesstimating that there's probably thousands of conversations and maybe many more going on right now at companies, executives asking their IT people, how do we deal with this? How do we, what do we need to do to keep things going in light of the new news? And I think taking this on and giving it back to the community is great, especially considering that companies need this really bad. You could charge for this, but just like you just said, this is going to be given to the community, correct?
It will be totally no strings attached, given to the community. We're planning to open source all the build tools, all the environments, so that everyone can replicate it. We're planning to set up non-profit organizations that will house it all. So we're really trying to create pretty much what CentOS was.
That's amazing. You're basically giving companies back what they might have lost.
We hope we will be able to do that. And
That's
there is
amazing.
no reasons why we can't. I mean, what can stop us today realistically is that we don't gain traction, that people actually move away. But otherwise, we should be able to give people CentOS, but under the different name.
That's absolutely amazing. Is this new offering going to have a new name, or is it going to fall under the Cloud Linux OS umbrella?
It will have a new name. So today we call it a Project Lenix, and it's play on Project Phoenix, Project Phonics, basically reverse of whatever it is. But we do hope to get, so we actually ask community to give us suggest names, and we have a list of names we have to decide. It will be decide, we will decide in a week or two.
That's great. So not only are you giving it to the community, you're having the community help name it as well, which I think is going to be even better. That's really great. So when it comes to individuals in the community, since it's open source, it might be too early to say this now since you don't even have a name, but I'm assuming there's going to be maybe a way for people in the community to get involved and help develop it.
Definitely. So right now we're really running to bring the distribution to everyone so that people can touch something and know there is something that exists behind it. Because I think there is a lot of mistrust that it's impossible, that it will happen, how stable it is. So that's number one for us. But that's where a community can actually help us. They can help by testing it with different workloads and providing feedback. As we're going forward, it will all be outsourced, open source. So there is going to be infrastructure who someone has to take care of. There is going to be community forums. There is going to be bug reporting and bug triaging that people will have to do, package maintenance, anything. And we do hope to create a strong governing committee that will decide how to drive it forward and where it should go. Because our number one goal is to create the community that will help us to get the traction behind the OS, and that means vendors, that means original equipment manufacturers. But once we have this community, there is much more than community can do, but it depends on what community wants to do. We don't want to dictate to the community what they will be doing. And the way I see the role of Cloud Linux in this community, we will sponsor the development and maintenance of build and test pipeline, because we have to do it anyway for Cloud Linux OS, for the commercial OS for which people are already paying. So for us, it's not a big extra cost, but a way to give back.
So is it correct that one of the main differences between Cloud Linux OS and the new offering will be Cloud Linux OS, you get the support And then with the new offering, it's essentially in the same manner of CentOS, where it's given to the community to use, and they can use that and maybe upgrade to or migrate over to CloudLinux OS. How do you foresee the two coexisting, the two
Yeah.
products?
No, so there is actual technical differences between OS that are not connected to support. Uh, and that's why we don't see it as a conflict of interest. There is not going to be a case where we're pushing people to sign support contracts because that's not what we do. People buy Cloud Linux not for the support. People buy Cloud Linux because they solve very particular issues that are present only in web hosting environment. Once you go outside this environment, you don't have these issues, you don't need Cloud Linux. So it's never going to be the case that this new distribution is conflicting with Cloud Linux OS, and the only difference you get support or you don't get support, or you get patches faster or slower. This is not the case. There are two different distributions. One is free community distribution that we see people using in production. Uh, that is more community than anything else. And the other one is a commercial Linux distribution made only for people who post their web pages.
This sounds like something that could have a massive impact on the Linux community because you think about all the aspects. Someone who wants to get involved, they can get involved because they can get experience getting involved in a project. And then a company can keep the, whatever they use CentOS for today, they could keep that going. And then my understanding with Cloud Linux OS is that there's very custom changes to allow that to work in the environments it was intended for, including but not limited to a custom kernel, for example, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So we really look at Cloud Linux as a different distribution. But about our impact, we hope to negate the impact of Red Hat announcement. We're actually hoping that there is going to be back to normal and not a new normal.
That's a very amazing thing to do. Another thing that I really love about what I'm hearing is that a very common complaint that I get on my channel about distribution providers that shall remain nameless is that these bigger corporations, they'll make a change that, people are left scratching their heads. Why did they make this change? And why were we not included on this? And some people get, as I'm sure you know, very colorful in their words when some of these changes are made. If they feel like the rug was just ripped out from underneath their feet. And what I'm hearing here, I think will make a lot of people feel a lot calmer that the community is going to be involved. There's going to be a committee. There's going to be a decision-making process. It's not trying to abruptly change anything because you can. It's giving it to the community in all senses of the word. And I love that.
Well, we definitely strive for that. Of course, we will be tied to Red Hat. So Red Hat can still come back to us with System D2 or 3, which changes our world completely again. Who knows? I don't know. Uh, for now, we're taking things one at a time. We're not planning to do something completely new. We're trying to let Red Hat do what they do quite well. I mean, I have to say, uh, Red Hat is an amazing open source company who contributes a lot to open source, and they do amazing Linux, Red Hat Linux, but it's one of the best distributions on the market, extremely stable, 10 years stable updates where you can easily update from version to version without worrying that something bad will happen. Is a big, big thing, and we will follow their lead.
That's amazing. And the work that you're doing, I think, is going to be just a great impact. And I think there's probably a lot of companies out there that are, listening and or watching this, and they have something to look forward to that might actually allow people to sleep better at night as we close out the year, especially considering this news kind of just happened at the tail end of the year. But one thing I'm curious about is your opinion specifically about CentOS Stream, because my understanding is that's going to be developed ahead of Red Hat, not synchronized with Red Hat. So a lot of people used CentOS because it was, binary compatible with actual Red Hat Enterprise Linux. But this CentOS Stream is going to actually be ahead of Red Hat, which I think has a lot of people nervous.
Yeah, I think they're nervous for the right reason. It's not that it's going to be bad that is most worrisome, is that there is very little reason to keep it stable. More than that, we've seen Red Hat doing it before. I mean, the whole game, the whole play of, hey, we have the free and paid version, and now we have only paid version and unstable free version, was done by Red Hat in what 2004 when they switched from Red Hat Linux to Red Hat Enterprise Linux and Fedora. And we could see like Fedora became, you cannot use it for production pretty much right away. So do I expect the same happening with CentOS streams? Uh, I don't know the timing, but I do believe that in a year or two, you'll be very much worried about running YAM update on the production server if you're still running CentOS streams.
And that's actually one of the major things that people don't want to be worried to do. They want to be able to run that Yum update and not have to worry, oh my God, what's going to break?
And Red Hat was quite good at that. I mean, that's why so many people use Red Hat versus on Ubuntu, which is also great distribution. But Red Hat gives you 10 years of that without any worry. With Ubuntu, first of all, it's 5 years or 4 years. But second of all, it's still not as stable. Uh, yes, it's not, Ubuntu has much newer packages, but you still have more worries that each of your updates will cause some issues.
And we don't have to worry about all of a sudden everything converting over to snap packages, most likely.
That too, but that's completely separate
That's completely
subject, which
I
is
think it's right
quite
in there.
interesting with what Ubuntu is doing.
Yep, I do agree. So Cloud Linux OS has existed for over a decade itself. And obviously, to develop such a thing, you have to have your own tooling and processes in place. Although it might be too early to tell, are you able to reuse a lot of that same infrastructure and tooling to develop the new offering, or did you have to redo the tooling for it?
Well, if we would have to reduce the tooling, it would take us more than a year. We're definitely reusing all of the tooling, pretty much everything. We just need to set up processes and things for the custom packages, and we need to go through another branding exercise. So whenever today we write Cloud Linux, we will need to insert new name, we need to create a new signing ceremony and create new keys, all that stuff, organizational stuff. But otherwise, we're using pretty much everything from what we have to build Cloud Linux OS, and that's why we can deliver so fast.
Sounds like you guys are working extremely hard on this. I can definitely
We
tell.
do, and one of the things that I'm not happy is that we cannot also, open source it right away, just too tied into a bunch of our internal systems that have no relationship to uh, the Linux distribution itself. But we're already starting the process of figuring out of those key points and having someone deeping it out so we can open source the whole system so that anyone can take it and roll out their own Linux distribution.
That sounds fair to me. I think that with many passionate communities, such as the Linux community, when you put something out there, they'll judge it as it is today. If you put it out today, and if it comes out too soon, then someone's early perception of it might color their perception of the finished product. So I think that that sounds fair because you don't even have to open source it at all. Let's be honest. So I think that's great.
I think we have to. I think no one will believe a company today to do the right thing. So you have to create the safety valves so that it would be believable. Because, I mean, how am I better than Oracle Linux or Red Hat Linux? What really protects the community from us uh, 5 years later, 10 years later, being bought out by IBM and doing the same thing? So what we want to create is a way for community to go forward, even if we're out.
So, I think it is needless to say that the news from Red Hat slash IBM has actually disrupted trust in a lot of companies out there. So I appreciate that you're taking the time to make sure that you're focusing on trust and rebuilding that trust and using that as the basis. And I think that alone can really make this project successful for sure. I think that a lot of people are going to be very happy to hear about that. And one question I'd like to ask is if we were to fast forward into the future a little bit where you have the name for it and it's out, it's available, and let's just say I'm a company that today runs CentOS 8. How do I convert my existing CentOS 8 server? How do you envision that process to be to migrate to the new offering?
Well, it's actually very common question that we're getting, and it's very simple. We will provide a single command script, you run it, and what it does, it changes repositories to which your server will go, and it changes the PGP key used to verify packages, and that's it. So everything stays the same. We don't restart anything. You don't have to move any data. You don't have to do anything at all. No restarts, nothing. Uh, Very transparent process that takes seconds per server and can be automated in 5 minutes for large fleet.
That sounds great. So I'm loving everything that I'm hearing about this because I think you're, as a member of the Linux community myself, speaking personally, this, it helps to know that a company is focused on trust, and not only that, making it easy for an administrator. Now I'm wearing my system administrator hat that doesn't want to have an entire weekend of mass updating servers to a completely unrelated distribution, and then you're going to make it easier for people to run that script and get those repositories converted over. So personally, I think that's a great way to handle it. I think a lot of people are going to be pleased to hear about this for sure. And is there anything else that you would like the audience to know about your company, the new offering? Basically, open floor for you to talk about any aspect you'd like.
Well, I would definitely like to go to talk about some other Linux distributions that can do the same. So I do want audience to know that we're not the only choice to go from CentOS. There is Oracle Linux. So if you don't have a allergic reaction to Oracle, why not? They have very decent distribution. It's rather good distribution. It's stable. It's secure. Um, they're doing really good job. Um, I also hope that Rocky Linux, which is a community distribution uh, that is basically doing the same thing as we do, will be successful. So there is a bunch of people who are working there to do another CentOS fork or Red Hat fork that will replace CentOS 8. So there is a lot of, like, people shouldn't feel like they are put in the corner. They are not. There is choices. Um, for them, they will have multiple choices, which are that will be very easy for them to onboard, that will not require switching to completely different distribution, that will not require them to buy a Red Hat subscription. And it's not the end of the world. That's probably one of the very important things that I wanted to say. Um, Second of all, like that's basically what I often hear from people is that people are afraid that Red Hat will cut out open source completely, and well, basically will prevent us from doing downstream forks. And I want to believe better. I do feel like Red Hat will not do it. It's open source, and for them to do it, they really have to betray the whole open source notion. They might make it more difficult for us. They did it before. They made it more difficult to rebuild their OS. But I don't think they will ever prevent people from doing downstream forks. Um, I think if they ever gonna go this way, a lot of people who work for Red Hat will quit. A lot of key people, maintainers will say that we don't want to associate anymore with you. And that will cause Red Hat to lose more than just having this free open source nor string attached distro available.
I'd have to agree with you. I know individuals that work for Red Hat, and the thing is, they celebrate the employees celebrate the aspect that they're open source. And then, I'm not a legal expert, but what's put into open source is really hard to take out because there's all these libraries and all these different components that they would have to figure out how to close off. And I'd have to say, of all the things that Red Hat would do, I doubt it. I don't see how. I mean, I've been surprised before. I can't tell the future, but that would probably be the biggest challenge of the company to take that away. So if that's the only, or not the only, but if that's one of the main worries that you have going into this project, I think you're doing pretty good, actually.
Yep. Thanks.
So, all right. So unrelated questions, just for fun,
Mhm.
just to kind of have some fun here. Vim or Emacs?
I was a long-term Emacs user until IntelliJ came in. Then I would use IntelliJ or VI. So for everyday small file edits, VI. For everything else, IntelliJ.
Do you have a favorite desktop environment?
To be honest, I had to switch to Mac. So for servers, we do run Linux. For my desktop, I switched to Mac as an theoretic as it sounds. Um, at some point of time, about 3 years ago, I realized that I spend more time upgrading and fixing things on my Ubuntu than actually using it.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
And I'm finding that's increasingly common. On this channel, I like to talk about every aspect, the server side of things, the desktop distribution side of things. And my motto is use whatever works, whatever helps you get your job done. That's the tool to use. But I think, full transparency, Mac is a good platform for those people that it caters to, I believe.
I think it also depends on what you do. Like when most of my work was developing software, I would use Linux. And today, like anytime I have to touch development on Mac, I actually suffer because there is no normal package management system, and I'm tired of Mac Brew. And my son, who is just getting into all that stuff, he recently switched his Mac to Ubuntu. He got Dell and installed by himself Ubuntu, and he's very happy with it. And he's not as frustrated, or he's not frustrated at all when he has to figure out why something doesn't work and fix it.
Yeah.
For me, most of my day is spent in Zoom, mail, and documents. So I don't get as much mileage from Linux desktop as I did before.
Yeah, that makes sense. And especially considering there's a huge difference, and just so my viewers understand it, they don't already know, when a laptop or desktop ships with something like Ubuntu is a far different experience than if you just grab a computer off the shelf and just randomly install Ubuntu on it. It may work great. It may be a complete train wreck too. It kind of depends on hardware compatibility and a number of other factors. But with Mac, obviously Mac OS is going to work on that. And then if Ubuntu ships with the machine, then chances are the manufacturer has already fixed those edge cases that you may have ran into. With that kind of thing. So that's also an important thing. And I know many people that use Mac, but they use primarily Linux servers, but no judgment. That the stuff is here for us to use anyway, that it benefits us to use it. And a company like yours makes some great things available for us to benefit from, including but not limited to kernel care and the new offering that shall be named soon that's coming. CloudLinux OS, those are some great products, though. I think you should be proud, and especially proud of the fact that you're approaching this new endeavor with full transparency and with the spirit of open source. And I feel like a lot of people will benefit from that.
Thanks a lot.
And then one last question, which is Star Trek or Star Wars?
Oh, definitely Star Wars. Once again, it's kind of interesting. I had the same discussion with my son. He likes Star Trek. I like Star Wars. Yeah, I totally understand that I like fantasy. I'm a fantasy guy. Uh, I like the story. That's it. Yeah,
That's good stuff.
yeah.
So
But
it's been a
if you
pleasure.
ask which book I prefer, it's
Yep.
Cryptomanicon.
It's which one?
Cryptomanicon. I might be
Awesome.
pronouncing it wrong, but it's amazing book.
That's amazing. So fantasy, sci-fi fan, fellow Linux
Definitely.
geek. So you're in very good company here. So It's been great having you on. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to my audience. And this has been a fantastic interview. And I'm going to get this up on the channel as quickly as I can.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.